Dave, you've got a great background in the entertainment and attractions industry, David. What can AV learn from the industry?
I think one of the main things that, especially at my time at Disney, is a huge focus on what they called guest centricity, like a true focus on the guest. And so much of that is about focusing on the guest, and in the AV industry, in their terms, think about the customer experience, right? And I think that's really critical, is just putting the customer first. And especially at Disney, but of course everyone else in the themed entertainment industry, now the sense of truly immersing someone into a new environment. And of course, there is something transformative about being in Hogwarts, right, or being in Star Wars land. But the amazing thing about our world and the digital world, and what you see at the show floor, is now the ability with digital projection and projection mapping, or just the amazing ways in which now you can put pixels into the physical world, can now, in a way, make you believe that you are now in a totally new environment. I mean, yes, it's magical to walk around Epcot and feel kind of like you're in Paris, but then to walk into an environment which is now fuses the analog and the digital, that's going to be really transformative. That's going to be really exciting. Yeah, I mean, I think most people who find themselves at Disney are theme park buffs. At ISE, I made sure to do a side trip to Efteling to see, because it's a very different kind of themed entertainment park. And what I like about there is that some of these very some would say old school techniques are still very valid. Even just the idea of kind of walking into almost like a life-size diorama, without even like all the high-tech effects and pyrotechnics and projection mapping, because it all gets to the root of storytelling. You start with a great story, and then you tell it with honesty and authenticity. And it's magical. It goes to the root of who we are as people and as communicators and storytellers.
We've got collaboration technology pretty well stitched up now, haven't we? But there seems to be a gap between collaboration and effective decision making. What's the technology we're going to see coming along to enable this decision making process to work effectively?
Now, this is my personal belief, is that in most meeting rooms, you have, three main bottlenecks, right? You have a bottleneck in terms of how much information can be shared, because there's usually one input. You have a bottleneck in terms of how much information can be viewed, because there's usually only one output. And there's a bottleneck in terms of how many people can actually contribute information, because there's only one presenter, one person with the ball, right? So due to those three bottlenecks, right, what do we have? What tool do people use to bring their information together? It's a PowerPoint deck, right? And unfortunately, PowerPoint decks aren't really that great to really come to a decision, because you have to linearly remember this data, that data. And so you have no ability to compare, cross-reference, or contrast multiple data sets, and you have to hold all that information in your mind. That cognitive load is pretty significant. And so it's a horrible tool, to use. And so with Mezzanine, we really wanted to erase those bottlenecks and say, let's expand the number of inputs. Let's expand the number of the canvas where you can use to experience and visualize and explore that content, and open up the aperture so multiple people can engage and interact. And that's what we think is the magic, is now you're truly getting a collaborative act as opposed to a performative act in the meeting room to actually drive to an outcome.
When we're dealing with big AV environments that are delivering multiple channels of information visually and otherwise, do you think they're delivering too much for you to really take in effectively?
Possibly. In some ways, we're trying to claw people back to the way they behave naturally. So, for example, right, on a audio conference call, anyone can yell fire at any time, but people don't, right? When you're sitting around a table, anyone can dip their fork into someone else's plate, but they don't. Even at a digital or analog whiteboard, right? There's no one standing there with the one marker saying, do you want drawing privileges? Here, you now have drawing privileges. It's socially managed. We're social beings. We want connection. We want to collaborate. And that's what we see. Now, does it happen instantly in a new environment? No, it takes a little bit of storming before you're norming and then you're performing. But once you are, it's transformative.
The great thing about collaboration technology is it seems to be removing barriers that we traditionally used to have. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Yes, I mean, once again, it's about getting that diversity of information, of data, of thought. Because anytime you bring a team together, right, you want that foundation of shared knowledge and building knowledge. And even more critically now, especially when we're dealing with remote teams, is getting to that moment of trust and building of trust. And right now, there's not a lot of, if everyone gets on a video call and they all go on mute, it is very hard to build trust because we lose those human factors. Simple things like posture, gesture, facial expression. We lost a lot of those when we went to virtual collaboration, especially for remote workers. I mean, one of the big challenges of remote workers is a feeling of disconnection and isolation. And one thing that we found really fascinating when we did our research is, a lot of times, everyone here at this show, for all the right reasons, are talking about being video first and being video forward. But oftentimes for remote workers, you need that freedom to be able to go on audio and video mute. Like maybe you just rolled out of bed, maybe the dog's barking, the baby's crying, and you don't want to distract your colleagues with your environment. So you go on audio and video mute. But at that point, in tools today, you are now barred from participating in the meeting, right? You may not be there. And what we're working on now are some really interesting ways that we could let that remoter who's on audio and video mute to have a voice in an online conversation. We're really excited about what we're developing in that area.
What new technologies are you working on? Are you looking at acoustics, new tracking technology, for example?
Some new innovations that we're working on just in Oblong in general. So one is, we've gone from our acoustic tracking to more optical tracking, and we're making fantastic innovations in terms of how we can, use our wand to be able to drive more diverse environments, using even a minimum of optical tags. And so we're really excited about some innovations we've done there. Our advanced technology team is doing some really amazing work building kind of immersive experiences. So in a way, like imagine a giant display wall, right, or an immersive environment. A lot of companies invest a lot of time in the development of that experience. Everyone loves it, but then after a month, people are like, well, what's new? And the people forget that, you don't just want to build that experience, you want to build a tool to make it repeatable. Like one thing a theme park never has to worry about, or they can rely upon, right, is that people will come back once every couple of years. You don't have to refresh it all the time, right? Or you get the crazy fans and they're there all the time anyway. But if you're trying to make a brand statement or you have a customer experience center, right, you want to be able to refresh the story of your technology to make it relevant to different customer groups. So what we're working on is, I kind of call it Keynote for immersive environments. Like a simple tool that lets you bring a wide diversity of content and array it and program it, but in a way that we can give this to a customer and now they can tell the story of their brand without having to repeatedly come to people like us or go to an outside agency and bear all those upfront costs. So we've done some really innovative work there that we're excited about.